Alice is ZenlessZoneZero's third ever released physical anomaly agent, and with her banner on the horizon, there are very important questions to be answered and factors to consider. How do you build her? What's the best way to play her? Is she just a Jane clone? And most importantly, can she compete with Miyabi, the best current DPS in the game? Worry not, as in today's video, we'll be going over topics like these and covering everything you need to know about Alice's full kit, how her playstyle works, and what teams she fits best into. But as a reminder, today's video will be made with footage from the creator beta server and things are subject to change. But if you found today's video helpful or enjoyable, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But without further ado, let's break down everything you need to know about Alice and her potential teams. Let's start by explaining how Alice plays. Alice is a fast, hard-hitting character who uses a special meter called Blade Etiquette to deal significant damage and apply Anomaly. In general, Alice's kit revolves around building and spending said special energy, and this powers her strongest abilities. Once she has enough of this resource though, she can then use this to perform a charged basic attack that gets stronger depending on the number of bars that she consumes to do so. If she uses the maximum of 3 and lands the final hit, this triggers a powerful finisher that deals instant high burst damage. Beyond this, she otherwise simply fixates on filling the enemy's anomaly meter, and upon doing so, she is then given a special basic attack that deals increased damage plus applies a decent amount of anomaly itself. When preparing to play her though, Alice works best when paired with other physical based agents or off-field characters so that she can dedicate more time to building anomaly and instantly trigger physical anomaly even when she's swapped off-field. Now let's break down Alice's kit. To start things off, Alice's special resource is called Blade Etiquette, and whenever she triggers assault, she gains an extra 10 points of said resource. The max amount of etiquette she can hold is 300, and every 100 points that she gains gives her 1 full bar. These bars / charges are then used for her charged basic attack, and this in concept is like a hybrid of Evelyn and Miyabi's own powerful attacks. When Alice lands the final hit of this charged basic attack though, she also triggers something called Polarized Assault, which causes an assault anomaly immediately without needing to build up anomaly first. The best part about this as well is that this anomaly can trigger disorder when paired with any element, including physical. And as a side note, whenever Alice triggers an assault, she also gains increased physical anomaly buildup rate for the next 30 seconds. Now, although parts of her core passive are included in her special resource that I just described, now would also be a good time to talk about the other effects she gains from her passive. When any squad member applies a physical anomaly on an enemy, Alice deals bonus damage every 0.95 seconds during its active duration, equal to 2.5% of the original physical anomaly damage. Additionally, if disorder is triggered while the enemy is affected by a physical anomaly, the disorder damage multiplier increases by 18% for every 1 second of the total remaining anomaly duration, up to a maximum of 180%. Put simply, this makes her incredibly powerful when using anomalies or disorders, and as a result, she'll fixate primarily on applying anomalies and her charged basic attack as frequently as possible. Now let's talk about her additional ability, Mystery Hunt. This gives Alice bonus energy if she's paired with either supports or anomaly agents, and once active, when someone on the team creates a disorder, Alice gets 30 Blade Etiquette back instantly. This helps her build her unique resource quicker, of course, and with the resource, she can then use her charged basic, which of course is the main focus of her gameplay. In addition to this, Alice also has additional effects if her anomaly mastery reaches a certain threshold, and with this, once she's past 140 anomaly mastery, each additional point will grant her 1.6 anomaly proficiency. Alice's basic attacks are a combo of 5 slashes, but if she triggers assault first, the 5th hit of her basic combo transforms and is enhanced. This is a major part of her gameplay, as this does deal more damage and apply more anomaly than her normal basics, but as you'll experience in combat, the long animation attached to this basic can have its own drawbacks. Alice also has access to a charged basic attack known as Starshine Waltz, and with this, if she holds down her attack input while she has part of her Blade Etiquette meter filled, she'll zoom, spin, and slash several times. To be clear, the more resource that she consumes for this, the stronger the attack is, and with this, the skill also applies a decent amount of anomaly to an enemy. As a reminder though, the last hit of this move will also trigger Polarized Assault, and this is functionally the same as a normal assault, but it doesn't matter how filled or what the progress of her anomaly meter is. Next, we have Alice's EX Special. To start things off, Alice has 2 EX Special movesets. Northern Cross charges forward through enemies, and Southern Cross moves her back first, then lunges forward for a big hit. Now, both of these moves do hit pretty hard, but the main advantage to using them at all is the anomaly that they apply and the Blade Etiquette that they restore. Now, numbers wise, the multipliers and values of the Southern Cross EX Special are technically higher than the Northern Cross, but given the slightly longer animation animation and time it takes to perform, this value can be argued against, and overall the application value is pretty similar. On the topic of animations though, it is worth noting that these EX specials do feel slightly longer or laggier than most EX specials in this game, and as a result it will take some time getting used to, though again they are quite powerful. Alice's assists are honestly pretty normal and unnoteworthy, but because she does apply Assault Anomaly, performing defensive assists can contribute decently towards stunning an enemy in the long run. Alice's dodge does feel pretty decent, and similar to Jane, there will be opportunities where dodge counters come into play, but overall, since there are no special features attached to the skill, but should still be used whenever you need it. Now let's talk about Alice's chain attack. Alice's chain attack is Starfall Intermission, and this is a fast and powerful combo of slashes that hits enemies in front of her. Aside from the decent physical damage that this deals, this ability is also a decent applier of Anomaly, and as a result it should be used / prioritized in any chain attack combos that are performed on a team. Now when Alice's decibel rating is full, she can then use her strongest move, Starfall Finale, and this of course is her ultimate. This skill hits a big area in front of her with a huge slash combo that deals massive physical damage and also applies a significant amount of Anomaly, but most importantly, this skill also gives Alice 200 blade etiquette, which means she can then follow this up in most cases with an EX special or just a raw charged attack, but of course this depends on your resource meter. Before we get into the teams section, let's quickly go over the format of this testing once again. As always, the goal here was to have all primary DPS's additional abilities active, as without them many would lose notable amounts of damage. That said, I did still test some teams with DPS who didn't have them, and within these specific tests, teams were definitely carried by stronger DPS's, and as a result, having a DPS's additional ability active is still definitely recommended across the board, even if I've tested them and they've had some success. For non-DPS agents, whether or not their additional abilities were active was a much lower priority, and so supports, defense agents, or sometimes even stunners were used without their additional abilities. As a final reminder though, these characters did have their ideal signatures / W engines, were used at M0 if they were S ranks or M6 if they were A ranks, but finally I am no insane gamer, and some of these scores will naturally vary, as some will be better, some will be worse, and all I'm asking is that you keep this in mind when evaluating the clear times and performance results. These of course are only meant to serve as guidelines or indicators for each team's general effectiveness, not perfect representations of their max potential. Let's start by breaking down the double anomaly team setup for Alice. Some of the quickest lineups here included teams like Alice, Vivian, Yuzuha, and even Alice, Jane, Yuzuha. These had incredibly fast clear times in content where bosses had limited health bars, but while this by itself was already very impressive, Alice, Vivian, and Yuzuha also delivered one of the highest deadly assault scores across the board. This team therefore benefited greatly from the insane support that Yuzuha provided to anomaly characters, and this was a near perfect setup of applying assaults, triggering disorders, and overall generating unique resources needed by both characters. Another notable variation of this was the previously mentioned Alice, Jane, and Yuzuha, who also achieved a shocking sub 60-second clear. However, the deadly assault scores for this lineup performed at around 15 to 25% lower than the highest performer, depending on the boss. Now, this meant that while Jane performed well with Alice and Yuzuha in situations where the boss had finite health bars, her long-term contribution to damage simply could not match Vivian's, making her more burst-oriented and having less consistent DPS and more difficult deadly assault counters. Meanwhile, Alice, Yanagi, Yuzuha also cleared at around 46 seconds, and while this team was still fairly efficient, it noticeably fell behind in both speed and score, with a roughly 18 and 22% decline respectively. That said, Yanagi still provided great value to the table as an anomaly unit, so you certainly shouldn't write her off. On the topic of multiple anomaly agents on the same team though, triple anomaly teams like Alice with two anomaly focused teammates like Grace or Piper usually underperform. Now, while they may seem strong on paper due to having high anomaly buildup, and for some teams satisfying everyone's additional ability requirements, these teams often lacked the supportive buffs or overall damage increases needed for high scores or for fast clears. As a result, these deadly assault scores were consistently lowered compared to teams that had a dedicated support like Yuzuha, and with this it was clear that if you're aiming for the best possible results with Alice, you should definitely stick to double anomaly teams with a strong support, as that's where her potential truly shines. I also found some surprising results from the double support category with Alice, and this is particularly in deadly assault. Within these clears, the double buffing, constant energy generation, and quick assisting helped deliver strong scores. But what's more impressive here is actually that their deadly assault scores were nearly on par with the best performing teams, including by Alice, Vivian, and Yuzuha. This comp, however, traded some of Vivian's raw damage for the additional quick assists and energy support through Astra, and it paid off with stable, high-scoring run. Now, on the other hand, Alice, Yuzuha, and Nicole showed slower but still respectable results, clocking in at a slower 56-second clear. Now, while Nicole did bring valuable team-wide buffs with this, the overall damage output just didn't match that of stronger DPSs or supports like Astra. Looking at the broader picture though, double support setups where Alice is paired with two non-DPS characters tended to perform better than expected in Deadly Assault, often offering more reliable scores across a variety of bosses. This makes sense as characters like Nicole or Lucy were more useful than Anomaly DPS like Piper or Grace with Alice, but even despite this, said characters were still quite behind the top tier Alice/Vivian teams, especially when it came to burst windows and quick clears. Now, in short, if you're missing limited Anomaly supports like Vivian, Yanagi, and Bernice, and you wanted more consistency in long-term fights, double support teams with Alice were definitely a strong fallback and something that you could consider. Now, while Jane does pair decently with Alice in terms of team synergy and survivability, her overall performance still generally fell short compared to teams that included characters like Vivian. One of the best performing setups though, which was Alice, Jane, and Yuzuha, achieved a respectable 39-second clear, which does end up being one of the fastest clears from my testing. However, despite the fast clear speed, the Deadly Assault scores were still consistently lacking, with the 15 to 25% decrease in score staining her overall performance. Now, when comparing Jane and Alice to each other, the results show a split and pros and cons for both depending on the metric that you're looking at. In terms of raw clear speed or when fighting against lower health enemies, Jane generally outperformed Alice by about 12 to 14% across most teams. However, when it came to scoring, especially in Deadly Assault, Alice consistently pulled ahead. To give a specific example, the Alice, Vivian, and Yuzuha team outscored its Jane counterpart by around 11 to 13% against certain Deadly Assault bosses, and for another Deadly Assault example, Alice, Yanagi, and Yuzuha also saw score differences as high as 22% in Alice's favor. Now, there is one more team composition or style that I wanted to talk about, and while it might sound obvious at first, I was genuinely speechless seeing Miyabi's performance with Alice. To be clear, I fully understood that Miyabi is the strongest DPS in the game, and I've tested her in countless setups, and I'm also well aware that many of her compositions turn into Miyabi dragging two teammates across the finish line types of clears. But in all of these tests I performed, Miyabi-based lineups rarely ever cracked the top 10, yet alone the top 5 most consistent teams for allies when paired with another on-field DPS. Teams like Ishwan Miyabi, Hugo Miyabi, Ellen Miyabi, or even Evelyn Miyabi were passable, but clearly worse than most synergistic setups like Evelyn Lighter Astra, for instance. That's why this result came as such a shock. The team of Alice, Miyabi, Yuzuha not only performed well, it was one of the fastest and highest scoring teams that I've ever tested, and by a noticeable margin. Clear times were 32 to 53% faster on average, and Deadly Assault scores were typically 28 to 39% higher in terms of performance. This is pretty huge. Now, to be clear, running two of the best DPS units together is certainly overkill or inefficient in most cases, but if you were interested in using two powerful DPS together, this lineup didn't just work, it performed amazingly. Even without heavy optimization, the synergy, pacing, and raw damage made it one of the best performing and honestly fun lineups in the game right now. For transparency's sake, I did also test other Miyabi variants without Yuzuha, and with this, another strong lineup I found was Alice, Miyabi, Astra, which makes sense, and also cleared in around 46 seconds, while also scoring among the top 5 for all Alice-based teams. Now, although this didn't perform at nearly the same level as the previous team, the lineup was still great and put up very competitive numbers. Overall though, Alice paired with Miyabi and almost any competent support character consistently landed at the top of the charts. These teams not only outperformed most others in clear speed, but also delivered significantly better Deadly Assault scores on average. With this, if you're looking to get the most out of Alice, pairing her with Miyabi and a well-suited support like Yuzuha is an amazing way to do it. But that then brings us to an even more important comparison, and that's Alice versus Miyabi as standalone DPS units. Now, while the two make a strong duo when paired together, it's recently become a trend and quote-unquote important to test whether a new agent released is Miyabi level. Now, to disclaimer before we begin, of course, each agent will outperform the other in their own specific weakness having encounters, and as a result, fighting against a boss like the Marionettes will leave Miyabi with the better performer largely because of her element advantage's impact. Beyond this, however, on average, Miyabi teams had noticeably faster clear times than Alice teams, though clear speed isn't the only factor that matters. In Deadly Assault specifically, Technically, both Alice and Miyabi teams performed fairly close in terms of score, but that said, there were still some standout teams. The Alice Astra Yuzaha team, for instance, scored about 7 to 9% higher than its Miyabi variant, and on the other hand, the Miyabi Bernice Yuzaha team outscored the Alice version by roughly 15%. The biggest gap though came from Miyabi, Yanagi, and Yuzaha, which outperformed its Alice variant by a massive 18 to 20% in score. All in all, while Miyabi tended to look and feel a bit smoother to play, both she and Alice are clearly strong DPS choices, and each team of course has moments where they clearly shine. Before we move on, there is something important we need to address though. If it wasn't already obvious, Astra and Yuzaha are by far the best supports in the game, as they're incredibly versatile and slot seamlessly into almost any team. That said, there are other viable options worth considering. But while supports like Lucy and Nicole may not reach the same level of impact as Astra or Yuzaha, they still offer valuable utility and can hold their own in the right setups. With this, Lucy lineups were still within 5 to 12% of the average clear or score in Deadly Assault, and by comparison, Nicole still stayed within 11 and 22% of the average performance of Alice's teams. Now for her pre-farm, you'll need 3,705,000 Dennies, 300 senior investigation logs, 250 specialized physical chips, 75 advanced physical chips, 25 basic physical chips, 30 ruler anomaly certification seals, 32 advanced anomaly seals, 4 basic anomaly seals, 5 hamster cage passes, 9 sycophant refinements, and 60 of the toxic edge dimensional data in order to fully max out your Alice before she arrives on her banner. When it comes to W engines for Alice, Perfect Perfection is by far her best in slot choice. This weapon was clearly made for her as it offers a massive 60 anomaly mastery, which is an incredibly valuable stat for Alice, as her damage heavily scales with both anomaly application and disorder procs. However, what really sets Perfect Perfection apart is its bonus effect. When the holder triggers an assault, they gain an additional 20% physical damage. And since Alice frequently triggers assaults through her attacks and her charged basic, she benefits from this effect constantly, making this W engine a huge boost to both her base damage and her anomaly output. For free-to-play players, however, Weeping Gemini is her best alternative, with Fusion Compiler also being decent if you have access to it. On the topic, however, you may have also considered Magnetic Storm Alpha, as it does increase anomaly mastery as well. However, based on calculations currently given, the loss of base attack, the decreased main stat value that it gives, and just the overall effectiveness of its passive severely limits how powerful this can really be. Overall, it lacks bonus damage or any real scaling effects, making it significantly weaker overall compared to premium options, and as a result, it's usable but mostly used as a placeholder until you can secure something better. Now, another alternative is Electro Lip Gloss, and this W engine synergizes well with Alice's frequent anomaly triggers by granting a 10% attack buff and an additional 15% damage against enemies affected by an attribute anomaly. Now, since Alice of course applies anomalies regularly through her skills and charged attacks, she can also maintain this buff consistently. Now, while this doesn't directly boost anomaly mastery like Perfect Perfection, it does still enhance her overall DPS by buffing both her attack and her damage to affected enemies, making it a solid choice for players who already had Electro Lip Gloss chosen from the battle pass. The ideal disc drive setup for Alice is 4-piece Fanged Metal paired with 2-piece Phaethon's Melody, and the 4-piece Fanged Metal is a perfect fit for her because it does increase damage when any squad member triggers assault, which of course is something that Alice will be doing frequently thanks to her consistent anomaly buildup and charged basic attacks. This set directly amplifies her damage in the exact way that her kit is designed to function, so this is clearly her best in slot option. Pretty much just farm for this if you haven't already. Now for the 2-piece though, Phaethon's Melody is amazing given that Alice scales extremely well with anomaly mastery. The flat 8% increase from the 2-piece set is a massive boost to her anomaly application and of course her overall DPS. To add to this, given that most of her damage comes from applying this assault or through her polarity assaults, the set fits perfectly for her gameplay and her overall in-combat goals. As an alternative though, you could use any anomaly providing sets like Chaos Jazz or Freedom Blues as her 2-piece, but ultimately these will just be placeholders for you until you actually obtain a decent set of Phaethon's Melody. When it comes to main stats on her disc drives, drive 4 should be anomaly proficiency, disc 5 should be physical damage or attack percent, and disc 6 should be anomaly mastery. Now of course these main stats may change based on the support that you use, but in most cases using the disc drive with the most substat rolls will be your goal, as is the case in most games like this. Now let's talk about Alice's pros and cons. For pros, she is easily the best overall physical anomaly DPS. She has very flashy skills and character design. She does also have a summer skin which looks fantastic, and she can be played with other on-field DPS from initial tests conducted. That said, she does also have pretty decent and W engine variety, with her being able to use Electro Lip Gloss, Fusion Compiler, Weeping Gemini, etc. But as for her cons, her best supports are clearly limited, with Yuzuha and Astra being much better than the free-to-play alternatives. To add to this, her build doesn't have much flexibility and is pretty much locked into Fanged Metal plus Phaethon's Melody. But overall, guys, when weighing Alice's pros and cons, it's clear that she brings a lot of value to any account, especially for players who may not have pulled for Jane or even want to play Piper. As the newest physical DPS agent in the game though, she introduces a fast and fun playstyle with high burst potential and strong synergy with top tier supports. Her design and skin also add to her overall appeal. However, her real effectiveness is somewhat gated by the availability of limited support characters like Astra and Yuzuha, and admittedly, if you already have Jane or Piper built, you may feel de-incentivized to pull for her. However, if you already have the right supports and are looking for a top performing DPS with a unique identity, Alice is absolutely worth pulling for. That said, if you're missing said teammates or you may be interested in the upcoming characters, feel free to wait until the live stream where they reveal said characters, and of course, you can always wait for a rerun. That's going to be it for today's video though, guys. Thanks again for watching. As always, I hope that you learned or gained something from today's video, and with this, guys, I'll see you all next time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.